Ketogenic diet is a very popular diet nowadays, yet it's very controversial. Why? Because both American Heart Association and American Diabetes Association believe that excess saturated fat can be bad for us and it may cause heart diseases. Now, with all this in mind, I would like to invite our AAMG internal medicine physician, Dr. Mark Savant. As a doctor, why do you believe in ketogenic diet? Tell us your story.
So I read this book by this woman. Her name is Nina Teicholz. She is a science writer, and the book was called The Big Fat Surprise. She was a woman who had been a vegetarian for many years, had her kids and gained some weight and could never lose that extra 20 pounds that she put on after having her kids. Well, then she got a job writing for the food magazine Bon Appetit in New York. So she moved to New York and she started writing, and she had to go review all these fancy French restaurants and started eating fatty meat and cream and cheese again. And lo and behold, she lost the weight that she could never lose. And, you know, being a smart person, she was like, there's something going on here. So she started digging around and found all this information, all this research done about diets and how we came to the idea that fat was bad. And really what she found was that there was no good reason, no good scientific basis for saying that eating fat and animal fats was bad, because our ancestors have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years, right? And as I always tell people, we live in our ancestors' bodies, right? The body has not changed in thousands of years. It's the same body that our ancestors had 10,000 years ago, but we don't live our ancestors' lives. Now, we live longer because we have antibiotics to prevent us from, infections. And that's how most people die. It was usually infectious diseases or accidents or something. Now we deal with chronic diseases of our own making. Because when we started to tell people that fat was bad, we started to remove it from our diets. And this leads me to another story about fat and how we use fat and how we use sugar for energy. So I have a patient who's from Switzerland. He's almost 80 years old, and he grew up on a farm. And he said they used to take the milk from their cows and they would bring it down to the village, because in the village there was a machine, a centrifuge, that would spin the milk, because when you spin it, the fat comes out and then the whole milk, and you can separate all the fat from the rest of the milk. So they would spin off the fat, they would sell it for cream, they would get the whole milk with fat in it and sell that, people would buy that. And then what was left over was the non-fat milk, or the defatted milk. And the farmers used to bring that back to the farm to give it to the pigs. Why? Because it made the pigs fat. But why did the pigs get fat on the non-fat milk? It's because, right, milk has three things in it: fat, protein, and lactose. Lactose is the natural milk sugar. But what happens when you take all the fat out of the milk? All you're left with in the milk now is little bits of protein, and the rest is all lactose, or sugar. So if you go to the grocery store and you look at how much sugar is in milk, you'll see that skim milk has 15 grams of sugar per serving. Whole milk, the vitamin D whole milk, has 10 grams of sugar, and that heavy whipping cream in the carton has 0 grams of sugar in it. Okay, so the pigs got fat on sugar water. Now, as an aside for my Asian audience, where most people are lactose intolerant and not drinking milk. My wife is Chinese too. She can't drink milk, but I remembered that she could eat butter, and she had no problems with real butter. And I thought, well, butter is just cream that's been churned. And if the milk sugar is lactose and heavy cream has no sugar in it, it means it has no lactose. So I bet she can have heavy cream. So I took home some heavy cream. She tried some in her coffee, no problems, right? Because it's all milk fat, there's no lactose in it. But the real question is, why did the pigs get fat? And it's because the pigs are just like us. We can burn two kinds of energy. You can burn glucose energy, which is the sugar energy, or you can burn fat energy in the form of a fatty acid. To burn the sugar energy, your body has to secrete the hormone insulin. Insulin's very important. I'm sure everybody's heard about it because of diabetes. But insulin's job is to gather up the glucose energy and then store it. It will take the glucose or sugar energy from your bloodstream, and then it'll push it into your muscles to be used for energy, but your muscles can't hold so much. So what the insulin will do, it will take the rest of that glucose, convert it into a triglyceride, which is part of the cholesterol, and then store it in your fat as a triglyceride to be used for later. It'll store it in your fat and it will store it in your liver. But the other thing that most people forget is that the other thing that insulin does is that insulin stops you from burning your fat. It will literally stop the chemical reaction called lipolysis, which is the breakdown of fat for energy. It will stop that to force you to burn the sugar first. And once insulin is stimulated, it's stimulated for about 12 hours. And that's an important number to remember. It's about 12 hours. Once you're burning sugar, you can't burn fat. Now, if you eat something fatty, like our ancestors did and ate chicken liver and chicken feet and pork blood cake in your soup that was made from bones, it made a fatty acid. And to burn a fatty acid, you don't need insulin. So you can burn the fatty acid, and when your body needs more energy, you have plenty of energy stored up in your fat cells. Even if you're skinny, you have about 100,000 calories stored in your fat cells, which translates from about 30 to 50 days of no food. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's understanding that we don't need to eat so much just to live. We have plenty of energy. That's why if I give people the example, and I ask people this all the time in my practice, okay, so let's say we start off the day and I say, you can't eat all day, but I'm going to give you the choice. I will give you the choice of eating 100 calories in eggs or 100 calories in chocolate cake. Which one would you choose to last you all day long? Everybody says, well, I want to choose the cake, but I know I'll choose the eggs to last me all day long. And then I ask them, why did you choose that? You knew the correct answer, but they're both 100 calories. So it's not because one has more calories than the other. Why did you naturally choose the eggs? Right? And what we know is that physiologically, the eggs with all its fat and the yolk won't stimulate insulin. The chocolate cake stimulates insulin. Once insulin is stimulated, it blocks off your fat for 12 hours. Now you're hungry all day long, right? You just need to keep eating, no matter how much you exercise. The more you exercise, the more hungry you get. But if you eat the eggs, that 100 calories you'll burn, but then it won't block off your fat. So now you have plenty of energy, whether you exercise or not. And that's the basis of the ketogenic diet, is that it's trying to get you to burn fat as your body's first choice for fuel. And the problem that happened was that when we started removing all the fat from our diets, what do you eat instead? You eat more sugar and you eat more starch, which of course gets turned into glucose. So you stimulate insulin. And so no matter how much you exercise, you'll always be hungry and you'll keep eating more and more and more. But we have the example in our own cultures. We already know this. We don't eat rice at a banquet because it's a cheap filler. We know that. We know that a rice bowl is only this big. It's the size of the palm of your hand. And if you're eating mostly rice, you're probably poor, right? We also, here's also a really interesting thing. People didn't eat a lot of meat, okay? Now, what's that with meat? So the difference is that protein is not fat. So I have a dog, and I saw this article about the domestication of dogs. Like, when did dogs and humans become so, connected? And they said that the question was, why would dogs and humans team up? Because, the wolves and the humans would hunt the same prey. They should actually be competitors, but they teamed up because it's well known that the wolves and dogs can eat protein and digest it a lot better than humans can. Because if humans eat too much lean protein, they develop hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance. Hyperinsulinemia is too much insulin in the blood. Insulin resistance is type 2 diabetes. Why? Because all that lean protein gets converted into glucose energy, not fat energy. So if you eat mostly lean chicken breast or lean meats, you raise your blood sugar. But it's well known that humans can digest fat a lot better than the dogs and the wolves. So they could actually hunt the same prey, but eat different parts. And I remember when I was doing my research in all these diets, and I was reading about the Inuit, who are the native peoples of the Arctic. And I remember first reading that the Inuit would hunt like caribou or a moose or something like that, or a seal. And they would eat all the fatty parts. They'd eat the brains and the liver and the fat and the bones. And they gave most of the meat to the dogs. And I didn't understand why. But then all of a sudden I was like, the reason was because they didn't feel so good when they ate too much meat, but they ate all the fat. And I thought, well, okay, it's just these, these indigenous peoples in the Arctic or extreme areas. Then I started thinking about, well, no, Chinese culture, it was always fat. What was the favorite part of the chicken? It was the gizzards. It was the tail, which is all fatty. It was the skin. If you go and sit down at a French meal, right? The French have bread, right? French bread. But there's an expression in English that, if they only gave us bread and water, what does that mean? It means it was a bad meal. It means you didn't get anything good to eat. So when you go to a French meal, the first thing they give you in the first course, because they serve it in many courses, the first thing is pâté, which is liver, with a little pickle sometimes. Then the next course comes, and it's vegetables that are cooked in butter, and then a small piece of a fatty meat with a cream sauce. And then the next course comes, and it's typically cheese or a salad, and then the cheese. And then if you're lucky enough to have dessert, it's usually only a piece of fruit, because fruit is only for dessert. Or if you're lucky, like once a week, you get a little like creme brulee or chocolate mousse or something like that. It's like this big. And how do you make chocolate mousse? Lots of egg yolks, a little bit of sugar, but it's mostly egg yolks and cream and things like that. It's all fatty. And so most of a French meal is also very high in fat. And so then I started making the connection. My father loved all the fatty Chinese foods, and my mother loved cheese. Right? It's like, because they're actually quite similar. And then I started looking around other cultures around the world, all very similar. In Italy, when people eat, noodles or pasta, it only comes as one small tasting course. It's not the meal. In the United States, it's a meal, but it's only one little course, and it's shaped to hold all the rich sauce. If you have a tortilla, right? You have Mexican food, you have a tortilla. What's the important part about the meal? It's not the tortilla, it's what's inside. And what's inside? It's some kind of fatty pork with something fatty cheese, maybe some fresh vegetables, avocado, all fat. Every culture is very, very similar. Not everybody needs to be on a ketogenic diet, but we see very commonly among our Asian community, and especially among Chinese community, which I'm mostly familiar with, how many people have diabetes? So many, right? Probably over the years, our bodies were not built to eat so much sugar. And sugar comes in so many hidden ways. It comes in skim milk, it comes in ketchup. People like to put ketchup on their eggs, but ketchup has sugar in it. We drink fruit juice. We eat fruit 3 times a day. Our ancestors never did this. We're eating honey and agave nectar and maple syrup, all natural sugars. But how often do we really eat those things? Not very often. And so we build up a lot of inflammation. And so it's the sugar that drives the insulin. And insulin is the inflammatory hormone that then stimulates our bodies to produce cholesterol, because cholesterol is actually a molecule in our body that is used to fix things and patch them up. So it's not the cholesterol from the egg yolk that's becoming the cholesterol in our blood. It's the sugar that's causing the irritation and the inflammation. And then the body responds by creating more cholesterol to patch up all the irritation in the artery walls. So, as I like to say, when we removed fat from our diets, any dairy farmer in Switzerland could have told you what was going to happen. Right? People started getting fatter. Even though we exercised more and we ate less, we still got fatter. And it's because we just started eating more sugar and we started stimulating more insulin. And we became insulin resistant, because it's like, I like to talk about how insulin resistance is like loud noises for your hearing. If you listen to loud noises for a long time, after a while, you can't hear, right? So what do you have to do to hear more? To hear, you have to turn up the volume. So if your body is exposed to lots of insulin, after years of that, it's kind of like, I can't hear the insulin anymore. So your body's like, hey, we've got all this sugar that's so high. What do? Put out more insulin, because that's the way we know how to lower the blood sugar. So you put out more insulin, which creates more inflammation, and then your cholesterol keeps going up. And so the real key is to not stimulate insulin so much. And the way to not stimulate insulin is to remove or decrease the sugar and starch in your diet, because all the starchy food becomes glucose. To remove or decrease the lean protein in your diet, or to fast. Because if you fast for 12 hours, the insulin levels will then drop. When the insulin levels drop, now it's not there to block off your fat, and your fat becomes open and available to provide energy to you. And so that's why in the English word breakfast is to break the fast, right? You break the fast because you haven't eaten probably in about 12 hours. If you stopped eating at sundown, which is maybe about 6 or 7 o'clock, and then the next morning you don't eat until 8 o'clock, it's been probably 13 hours, right? And most of our ancestors worked on farms or outdoors. When they got up, the first thing they did was probably not to eat. They probably drank a little something, some water or some tea, and then they went out and they worked. So now they haven't eaten 12 hours. They're doing some exercise by working. And so now where is their body getting all the energy? It's pulling it from their fat. And then when they went back to eat, after doing some work in the morning, they ate something that was fatty. In Europe, they were eating cheese or some fatty meat like salami or something. And in Asia, right, we'd have like some fish or a little bit of vegetables and broth. And then how do you make the broth? You make it from the bones. And when from the bones comes all the marrow and the cartilage, which is all fat. And then you cook your vegetables in that, and you didn't have a huge piece of meat. You had little pieces of fatty meat, little cubes of fat with little bits of meat, protein on it, because you don't need so much protein. And you would eat that, and our ancestors were strong, they lived long lives, and they worked hard. And if they died young, it was probably from an infection or an injury or something like that. But it wasn't from a chronic disease. It wasn't from diabetes, right? It was from, because it was usually only the rich people who had access to sugar who got into trouble.